Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to enter Old Iowa Cemetery, and I'm going to explain something real briefly to you. This cemetery has a lot of tragic deaths, falling trees, epidemics, murder, odd wagon accidents along the cliffs of the American River, and Jared has, open it up, show me what this pamphlet says. It talks about the notable burials here, and I'll give you an example of one. Here we go. Frank brothers, Henry and George, natives of Germany, they perished in 1868 along with their partner's 8-year-old son, Clement Pelster. The men were removing tools from the base of a hydraulic claim at Ford's Bar in the North Fork. The bank caved in, killing them instantly. A large group of citizens retrieved the bodies and brought them here for interment. They are unmarked graves in the Protestant cemetery. By the way, folks, this is Masonic, Protestant, I.O.O.F, all fraternal groups. That's just an example. It talks about the tragic deaths in this pamphlet, which we'll put more information on our website rather than me talk about it here, because I just want to film and let you kind of see what this place looks like. But I'll talk about some of the burials a little bit. Yeah, this is the Protestant and Old Iowa Cemetery.
After losing their home to fire during the 1906 earthquake.
Earthquake? Oh my God. There's been... Show me another. Oh, here's one. This lady was born in 1700s, and it says a native of Germany. He was the father of August and Albert. He was described as a war hero, decorated on the field of battle. His last battle was Waterloo in the Napoleonic Wars. Wow, this is Banjo Hill. Here's one, only 20 years old, Margaret Chubb. Died 7/28/1860, 15 days after giving birth to her second child. 30 minutes before her death, she requested those present to sing the following beautiful verse she led. Oh, sing me to heaven when I am called to die. Sing songs of holly and ecstasy to wait my soul on high. A lot of stories. There's about 30 names in here. I'll give you one more. Patrick George died 1842, a native of Scotland. He came to America as a child. He worked at Red Point Mine in Damascus when a cave-in occurred, killing him and 4 Chinese. A group of 40 men in snowshoes brought him out to Iowa Hill on a sled for burial. It says, as typical at times, the names of the Chinese were not identified. Here's one, Charles Schwab. This is the man that kind of relocated the cemetery here, which we'll get into. Killed by a powder keg explosion. Oh man. It says he left 3 children, all young, 5, 3, and 10. His poignant marker reads, if love and care and death prevent, thy days would not be soon spent. Get the idea, folks. There's about 40 people who've died before their time was due. Here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Half of the burials here are people who died of freak accidents, murders, their time when they're not supposed to be, they ended up perishing. And you have to understand that these people, it was not their time to go. But Iowa Hill was such a harsh place to live. And we'll get into the history when I'm downtown. I'll get into some here, and I'll tell you about it. It started around 1851, 1852. Some people say 1853. I've had 3 different websites that give 3 different dates, but they said early 1850s when newspaper accounts stated there was 80 houses being built. 9 months later, 138 buildings faced Main Street. Eventually, there was 10,000 living here. They were going to make this the state capital, and they should have. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. The history of the cemetery, it was called the Old Iowa Cemetery, but it says it's not the original cemetery. This was located near the Schwab House in downtown Iowa Hill. I don't know where the Schwab House is, but it says, Herb Macy Sr. said he remembers there was graves where the Schwab's home was built across from where the present store is located. So the old cemetery is where the store is located, which I'll do some filming in EVPs. But it says when we were kids, we'd go down there and play. He goes, there was about 10 gravestones. Some were good stones, some were wood rotting away, and then there was... It says, I remember a big white stone as a square table. It also says there was a white marble headstone that read to the memory of Joseph Dunnigan, who died in Iowa Hill in 1855. Apparently what happened was, let me get into the story just a little more in depth. It says, when Stuart Schwab built the house, he took a bulldozer, pushed all the remaining stones into the canyon and buried them. This wasn't the first time there was troubles for the old cemetery. In 1859, Adelia Hill blocked off public highway from Iowa Hill to Bird's Flat, cutting off communication with the cemetery and where their loved ones were buried. So there's always been issues with these cemeteries, and they took some of the graves and buried them in a mass burial by the store. And you'll see what I'm talking about. There's a cabin now there, a lot of unmarked graves right in front of the store, which is kind of creepy. And then the rest of the graves, the rest of the people were buried here later down the road, or some of them were exhumed and relocated here. So I definitely will take some photos. It's a very nice cemetery, and I'll film, and we'll get a nice investigation going. This is your founder, Lord Rick. But in 1851, 1852, miners from Iowa discovered gold here. The post office opened in 1854. Stores, breweries, saloons, fraternal lodges, homes, church, school, temperance hall, anything you could think of. Brothels, hotels. And by the mid-1850s, it was a thriving town. Almost became the state capital. But fires prevented it. By 1880, there was about 20 million in gold. And as I was saying, there was 3 different fires: 1920, 1857, and I believe 1862. Each time it decimated the town more and more, unfortunately. But those fires, between the windstorms and other events in the area, such as harsh winters, really had a toll on this town. And there's not much remaining. There just really isn't. It says that $100,000 per week in gold was being mined in this region, at least by 1867. 1901, the post office changed its name to Iowa Hill, and so instead of it being Iowa City, it became Iowa Hill. They said all that remains is the Wells Fargo vault, old firehouse, couple old buildings, couple cemeteries. It's a registered landmark. Right in front of us, you can't see, is the American River, and a lot of the gravestones that are by the American River. There's old hydraulic mining, because eventually, instead of panning for the gold, they use hydraulic mining, which was almost banned, and eventually it would be because it destroys the environment. However, just below the cemetery is multiple mines up on the hills and the cliffs in the canyon. Actually, it's called the Forest Hill Divide, where the North Fork of the American River divides the Sierras, splits it from the north and the south. I'm going to go toward the back and then work my way back with pictures. I'm doing video right now.
Want to see something creepy? You see that trail over there? Richard went to go in front of it, and it pumped up to yellow and went back down to green. And I wasn't even moving. The trail over there,
Okay.
and a really old one. And when Richard got right in front of me, and it pumped up to like 4 and went back down to 2.
Oh yeah. Well, this is supposed to be a haunted site. Now, they could be just hogwash. People exaggerate. They start coming here and panicking. But if it is, it is. It's very historic. It dates back to the 1850s. Look, this one has a shoe. That's a little creepy. I don't know about you. Urban Pearl Fay. Just this year they passed away. Rest in peace. A lot of miners are buried here. A lot of people buried here, like I said, it wasn't their time to go, and they passed away. Illness, falling off a wagon trail, mine collapse. So dangerous to be a miner here.
Not that it's funny, but that's funny.
Oh, the parking meters?
It says time's expired.
Oh, yeah. Time expired, yeah, it's pretty funny. Located on a ridge between American River and Indian Canyon, Iowa Hill began growing in the 1850s. Based on the Jamison claim, which eventually the hydraulic mines. They also said they used a stamp mill to break up cemented gravel that was extracted from the mine. And of course, they were going to divide the Placer County and Iowa Hill. It says there was a proposal to divide Placer County and make Iowa Hill the county seat. It also said stages ran to Illinois town, and there was a trail, a wagon trail that led to Michigan Bluff. You could go to that, to Deadwood, Michigan Bluff, Last Chance, which are all nearby. There's also other settlements in the area. We had Independence Hill, Roach Hill, Birds Flat, Sucker Flat, Mineral Bar, Italian Bar. There's just so many, and there were all settlements with some stores and saloons and a tent camp. This is the back of the cemetery, huh? Also, I read somewhere a historian from 1861 said the business portion of Iowa Hill consists of 3 large grocery stores, 5 dry good and clothing stores, fancy store, variety stores, brewery, soda factory, grocery stores. They had 4 hotels, couple hardware and tinware stores, butcher shops, couple bowling alleys, billiards, some beer saloons, Methodist, Catholic Church, Masonic, and or Independent Order of Oddfellows, and a school as well as a theater. So this town was large. There's a grave. Look, these are not marked. Probably Chinese. They didn't mark the Chinese ones. Another one. August Belf. Or Baith. I can't read it. Anyways, there's another lady by the name of August. I can't really pronounce her name, but it's Belf. Or Belty. Engaged in mining at Prospect Hill with two brothers. Brothers Albert and August were drinking wine at the winery and got in a quarrel. Albert left, returned with a gun, and shot his older brother. The newspaper's articles describe Albert as always being a little loony. Constable Pursley brought him to jail. A trial was held, and Albert was judged insane and taken to the Stockton Insane Asylum, where he remained for over 20 years. A lot of quarrels here in this town. Eldest son of John and Nomi Smiley, Johnny Smiley, while cutting wood with a companion, a tree fell the wrong way, striking Johnny and killing him instantly. His parents had a store in Monona Flat for several years before moving to Iowa Hill. They lost 2 infants since 1876, 1883. And of course the fires, I'm not sure if they killed anybody, but they occurred in 1857, 1862, and also 1920, finished the whole entire town off. A colored man by the name of Milton Wimbish died age 25 in 1897. He was a brakeman on a timber wagon hauling wood to the Morningstar mine by Morningstar Lake. He was standing on the rear wheel of the wagon when the brake broke and the wagon crushed him to death. Mr. Wimbish's brother was contacted and a funeral was held at I.O.O.F. Hall. He was buried in an unmarked grave in the I.O.O.F. section of the Protestant cemetery. Frank Papa, 1904, injured his knee on the Big Dipper mine in 1898. He suffered with that injury in 1902. When he went to San Francisco to have his leg amputated, it failed to heal and was amputated again. Never recovered. Left 2 brothers, Arthur and John of Iowa Hill. John Smith died 1880 after Joseph Greenbauer's death in 1865. John became partners with Michael Smith in many business enterprises in Iowa Hill. He was the brewer for the brewery. In December 1880, John, 54, went to bed not feeling well. His son was sleeping near him and heard him breathing with difficulty. A boy alerted the mother, no available. John died, leaving a wife and 6 children. The Masons took up a collection to help the family. Up to a 4.
Yeah. And a yellow.
And then it went to a 1.
Yeah.
There's a Masonic section. We'll go on this side, then we'll cut across. There's an I.O.O.F. section, Protestant area, and then there's some unmarked graves in certain sections. The wrought iron ones are probably the Masons. Oh, here's an interesting story I'll tell you folks. Julie Murphy died at her home in 1894 of cerebral hemorrhage at age 68. She came to Iowa Hill in 1859 to join her husband. James Murphy was a pioneer here. Remained through her lifetime, the entire time, married in 1854. James left a few days later, seeking the gold fields. 4 years later, she braved a voyage around the Horn. Almost shipwrecked, came to Iowa Hill. The Colfax Sentinel reported the beautiful tone bell of the Catholic Church on Banjo Hill sounded the last farewell 68 times during the progress of the funeral procession. During the requiem of moaning pines and sighing cedars, Julia Murphy was laid to rest. That same bell is on display at St. Dominic's Catholic Church in Colfax. There's some broken stones. Wow, look at that one. Look, some of these are just stones. Jared Sparhawk died in 1898, 76. He married to Sybil Cass. In 1847, came to California. In 1850, ways by the way of Isthmus. He moved to Iowa Hill in 1854, purchased a share in the Hazel Green Mine, which was located adjacent to the Jamison mining claim. Listed in the Army in 1860s, taken the oath in San Francisco. He fought in the Civil War and was wounded at the Battle of Cedar Creek. He lost 2 fingers on his hand at the Battle of Cedar Creek. When the war ended, he returned to his old home in New York, then Kansas, where he farmed for a few years. In 1879, he returned to his home in Iowa Hill, and he and his wife celebrated their golden wedding anniversary in 1897. He's buried here beside his wife. I have not seen him yet. John F. Van Diver, 1882, he died, age 60, of lung congestion. He owned the mining claims at Independence Hill. He was a prominent businessman. He was cultured, buried in the Masonic section. He owned a home a half a mile east of the town at Centerville, which we've also been to. He had no relatives living in California. James Gleason noted in his diary how upset he was not being able to attend his good friend's funeral, as he's not able to leave work on the ditches that day. Webster Plummer, killed in February at the South Point Mine in Iowa Hill. A premature mining explosion, buried in the I.O.O.F. section. When Plummer's parents in Ohio were informed of his death, they wrote a letter to the residents of Iowa Hill, regarding the news of death of our dear beloved son, thanking him for caring for their son at the time of need. Records show that he had fondness for apples, and the week before his death, he bought 14 pounds and one book from A. Block and Company merchandise store. Plummer was the only resident to be a member of all three of the Iowa Hill militia companies. Wow, must be an infant. Thomas Entwistle, son of Thomas and Elizabeth, he was hauling hay with Matthew Mott. In 1871, the turnpike road from Wisconsin Will. The wagon plunged over the cliff. Matthew died 2 days later. Tommy suffered 3 years before succumbing to his injuries. He and Matthew are buried next to each other in the Catholic cemetery across the road. His father, Thomas Sr., died in 1880. He was an officer of the I.O.O.F. and an old respected foreman of the Aurora claim, where he was killed when he was washed through a flume. He and his family live in Independence Hill on the Masonic claim. He is buried across the street from his son. There was a guy that fell in a guy fell in a flume and died. And there's another guy that fell off a cliff near here. It's a lot of sadness. A lot.
Whoa, this tree is hollow.
Cool.
Hollow.
Born of Lorraine, France, John Henry, veteran of Mexican-American War, married to Sarah Welsh, a Cherokee Indian, in Manoa Flat in 1874. A miner by occupation, he survived 3 severe mining accidents and died of heart failure in 1890. He was a survivor, just like this town, the town that never died. That's what they used to call this place. He was a trustee for the Iowa School District in 1886. He's buried next to his son Lewis, who died at the age of 12 in a buckboard accident. What do you notice here, folks? A lot of tragic accidents. Those are just some of the burials. I can keep going. There are so many stories in relation to this place. John Hall, 48, died in mining accident. His wife Eliza died 6 months earlier, leaving their 6-month-old child an orphan, Eliza Jane. John's cabin, land, and mining interests were sold, and the money was used to care for Eliza until she became of age. She was raised by a court-appointed guardian in Iowa Hill. Here, Jared. Another burial, John Jr. Manuel, age 16, came from England to join his father a year earlier. He's owner and operator of the Rich Claim. He was hydrolyzing at a bank approximately 120 feet in height when it caved in. Another cave in. 4 years later, John Manuel Sr. was killed in a similar accident at the Casco Claim. Father and son are buried next to each other. Come here, Jared.
Okay.
I'll get a picture of you like on those steps, dude. Leonard Amelia, 2-year-old daughter of Nancy and John Leonard, died in 1857, buried on a hillside near their home at Bird's Flat. Her gravestone still remains with the inscription, "Kind angels, watch her sleep in dust till Jesus comes to raise the just." It says, "Then may she wake with sweet surmise, in her Savior's image rise." The family moved to Monona Flat, where John was a miner. 10 years after her death, her brother John G., while walking home from school with their mother, dropped his lunch bucket, and while trying to retrieve it, fell into an air shaft and drowned. In 1876, her father John took ill and died from congestion of the brain. He was buried in the Protestant cemetery near his son. Nancy Leonard remarried, moved away with her remaining family. Folks, these are just some of the stories. It tells you about the life that they lived. It was very hard up in Iowa Hill. Products were expensive. They had to be imported in from great distances or other towns that were 20, 30 miles away, or settlements in the area. Exploring the Tahoe National Forest holds a lot of gems. It's not just wilderness or scenery, but you have to remember there's a lot of historic sites, lakes, reservoirs, creeks, valleys, meadows. Bigfoot sightings are very intense and high in this region. And this ghost town is so remote, it's in the middle of nowhere. And we're living it. But I'm wrapping it up. It's time to finish up downtown here. This is your founder, Lord Rick of the Paranormal Ghost Society. St. Dominic's Cemetery, an old Iowa cemetery. It's not the original, but we'll take it. Iowa Hill, Protestant, Masonic, I.O.O.F. Cemetery near the turn of the 20th century. Photo from the old printer copy given to Bob and Sharon. Balmain, source unknown. Wow, it used to have a white picket fence around it. Look. And now it's just a rusty chain link fence. Wonder what happened.